Test. Test, test.
So do you have the recorder on? Not yet, but I do have it here.
Test, test. Can everybody hear me way in the back? Good? Is this everybody? We're missing a couple folks?
There's people outside still, but
I just mean the folks.
correct.
And I've already got it set so it's not recording through the internal microphones. It's only recording through the microphones. Okay. Keep in mind, everybody, these mics are incredibly directional, so you'll have to pass them. It's best about a fist to 10 inches away from your mouth.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you. We're debating what we're calling this group, but it is the Cannabis Advisory Committee or Board. My name is Lily Morgan. I'm one of the county commissioners, and I've been designated by the county commissioners to be the liaison for this committee. And so we have opted to choose 9 members of the committee for the committee plus 1 alternate. And some are not able to be here tonight. And tonight is an opportunity for us to get to know the committee members and to do some logistics as far as what we as a county have to do in establishing a board. And then we will go from there. So if you need, at the front table over here, to my left, to your right, there are copies of our agenda. There are copies of the proposed rural residential property rules. If there's not enough there for you to take, I will put out a signature list that you can give me an email address and we can email them to you. The other thing is the bylaws for the committee. So anything there, if there's not enough copies, we can get you more after this time. Committee members, I'm going to ask that you sign a roster. So press your name and sign a date. Those aren't ours. So that's Mark's. So if you want the more certain paper, you can add your email to it. We can email it to you. Okay. I'll stick around for a couple of minutes. Okay. Okay, so for those of you who did not get copies of the rural residential proposed wording, I did put a yellow pad up here you can add your name and email address to, and we will send that to you. And from there we will get going. So committee members, first off, thank you, because being a volunteer in Josephine County is something that we will exploit to every possible thing. We will use your expertise and knowledge as much as we can, and we will try to have meetings as often as we can that your families will wonder whatever happened to you. So as a volunteer, thank you very much for offering your time. I apologize for the setup. I do not see myself as higher than these folks. I want this to be a working group, but we were limited to microphones, and there wasn't a 4th stand, so that's why I'm attached to the podium versus sitting down with you all here. And I might rip the tape up and just come out here alongside so I don't feel like I'm staring at the back of your heads, but essentially, just to let you know what you have in front of you, we'll be going through tonight. We have some proposed bylaws, and we will not be discussing the rural residential issues tonight, but I wanted you all to have a copy of them, because at our next meeting, we have invited Rob Bovet from the Association of Oregon Counties to come down. He's one of the individuals at the state level that has helped draft much of the cannabis legislation and has advised on different things with various committee members. And so he's going to be giving us an update on the current status of state law and kind of where we're at. And I've also submitted these rural residential proposals to him so that after his presentation, that's something that we can field questions from the committee to Rob related to those proposals. The first hearing on the proposed rural residential stuff is scheduled for September 20th, which is before the next meeting with you guys. But we will be able to have our meeting before the second hearing. So if there is recommendations and such from the group, that we have the opportunity for you guys to speak to those. And so the first thing that we need to make sure that I have from each of you is one of the forms in front of you guys. I'm sorry, this is going to be boring. We got to do some business, so I apologize to y'all, but it's kind of what we have to do. So in front of you is the first and second pages on a two-sided sheet that was addressed. It's a memorandum from Councilor Wally Hicks. It was establishing public meeting kind of notices about quorum, document retention, ex parte contact, minutes notice, that kind of thing. I need each of you to sign one of those and get those back to me. I also did send down a, thank you. I also sent down a sign-in sheet for you guys for attendance. We're kind of doing things a little different because we expected enough public feedback to, not public feedback, public attendance that the normal meeting location wouldn't quite suffice. And, all right, so just before we leave, I'll make sure to get one of these from each of you guys. So the first order of business essentially is that we're going to be electing a chair and a vice chair. The agenda says in secretary. However, that is not a position that we have in the bylaws. And at this point, board staff will be taking the minutes off of the recordings that we have. And in order to elect a chair, it's probably important that y'all know who each other are. And there may be some questions and such. What I would like to do is give you all the opportunity to say a bit about who you are and why you wanted to be a part of this committee. And my intent was actually to spend the latter part of the meeting giving you guys each a chance to kind of speak on where your backgrounds and where you're coming from. But that's a little more appropriate for them to know in nominating a chair. So we're going to continue to start with that process. And so I'm going to just ask that we start down at the end. We can do it one of two ways, and I'll get you guys' feedback on your preference. We can give short introductions right now, and then move through the other business, and then give you guys more time to speak at the end to kind of where you're coming from, or we can have you do that all right now and just take a longer time getting through. What is your preference? Option A with a short and then follow up later, or option B, do it all now? I got one B. How many for A? Show of hands so I can see. So there's three. So for B?
I think if we're going to chair and vice chair nominations based on...
Before you speak, if any of you guys, I need you to speak in the mic so that for the recording's sake. So just pull a mic closer so they can hear you and it be in the recording.
So if we're going to do chair and vice chair based on the introductory contents, I think we should go ahead and do B.
Okay. All right, so just raise a hand on those for B. All right, there's four. There's enough. So just to kind of point out one thing that's coming up later is you're going to question the makeup of our committee. We have 9 plus an alternate. The alternate is a non-voting member except if somebody's absent. Well, we have absent folks tonight, so our alternate is a voting member tonight. So I just want to be clear about that as far as what we will get to in the bylaws down the road, but we are going to elect a chair and a vice chair after that. So before we go any further, I saw him sneak in the door, Commissioner DeYoung. So I have a chair up here for you because I know you're going to want us to talk, and I didn't want you to get away with sitting in the back of the room.
I'll do it because I'm hard of hearing. I'll see you right here to listen.
So one of the things I know I'm at a disadvantage of is I only saw all of you via applications and reading what you provided via writing. And so I know I've messed up how to say names and various things like that. So this is your opportunity to tell us actually how to pronounce your names. And I already got that one spelling is wrong. Mr. Gray is with an E, not an A. And we'll get that corrected. So I just ask that you kind of pass the mic, give each person a chance to speak, and we'll have an opportunity for each of you to take part. So introduce yourself if you are kind of in a geographic area or a portion of industry or something, kind of why you are good for this committee, what you represent, and what you're hoping to see out of this committee would be a great opportunity to share at this time. So I'm going to start at the end and work this way. Nobody's in any particular order in any way what's old-fashioned. So.
My name is Valerie Montague. I've lived in Josephine County since 1991. I have a degree in environmental studies biology. I did 5 years with Fish and Wildlife as a biological surveyor. I have 7 years serving as a planner for Josephine County. I am currently a licensed OLCC producer. I have a Tier 2 farm. Mostly, I think that extreme stances create inertia because you don't get any middle ground, you don't get any agreement. And what I'd like to think I can do is look at both sides, or all sides, and give an ear to all concerns and hopefully come up with something that works for everyone, even if it's not perfect for everyone, but something that that just allows everyone to get something that makes them feel more comfortable with the situation, even if it's not the perfect answer for everyone.
If you guys can hold that closer, it's hard to hear you.
Are you located on EFU land or rural residential land?
I am located on aggregate resource.
Okay, thank you.
And it does have some areas of
Can you answer it to the mic, please?
My farm is on aggregate resource, and we do have some EFU land in the area.
But not rural residential?
Not rural residential.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, I appreciate the public asking a clarification, but this isn't an interaction, and so you guys are able to watch, and if you have questions after the fact, but this isn't a time for public to be interacting. So we're hearing from the board. Please do not ask any questions. I appreciate that.
My name is Cedar Gray. I moved to Williams in the 90s, raised my 4 children there. I'm on this board because I'm the CEO and owner of Siskiyou Sungrown. Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I moved to Williams in the 90s, raised my 4 children there. We own both woodlot resource and rural residential zoned properties. I'm the CEO and owner of Siskiyou Sungrown. We're licensed OLCC producers, OLCC processors, and licensed ODA hemp producers. I've also served on multiple State of Oregon Rules Advisory Committees for the crafting of cannabis regulation for the OLCC, for the crafting of hemp regulation, and for the crafting of testing regulations. My educational background is I have an engineering degree. I've served on the Williams CAC, and I'm past president of Oregon Sungrown Growers Guild. My goal on this committee is to listen to all of the perspectives of the stakeholders and try to craft a solution that will work best for all of Josephine County. Listen to all of the...
My name is Gerard Fitzgerald. I moved to this area in 1988. I've been a licensed realtor since 1989. I am currently the chair of the Urban Area Planning Commission, of which I've served on for 14 years. I have 2 more to go, and then I'll get released. I do my practice of real estate as real estate development, land use, subdivisions, as well as building commercial buildings, as well as houses. The idea for me is the fact that as a realtor, I have an obligation, and I take an oath on my license to make sure that property rights are upheld for all people, not those that are powerful or those that have a special interest, but for all people. So I will be here and trying to add my 2 cents worth, if you will, and make sure that the rules that we apply here will be fair and equitable and with land use and the criteria of the state of Oregon also.
My name's Jared Panks. I've been a resident here since 1983. My family's been farming here since 1977. Who am I? I'm just a local grown kid. I was a former paramedic and a structural firefighter. I have a fire science and a paramedic degree. Also, I served on a hotshot crew. I fought fire for the government and toured the nation, going and managing large wildfires for 16 years of my career. As of 5 years ago, I came back home to tend to my family that was dying of cancer, and I started growing for the deaf and disabled. I started teaching them how to grow organically and how to grow their own medicine and giving them a job that they could do from home while raising their kids and opportunity at a better life. Who do I rep? I rep Oregonians. That's who I like to think that I represent. I represent our culture. I represent the best of what we really want for ourselves and for our citizens. I'm not here to serve anybody's point of interest other than looking out for everybody else. You know, I'm sitting up here, I feel like I put my head out very, very far to make my voice heard for everybody else. And it's something that I've been willing to do in my past by serving in EMS my entire life, and something that I will continue to do, fight for the opportunity at a better life and a quality of death that is the case. What I hope to accomplish is making sure that everybody's looked after, everybody has a fair chance, and not just the ones that can buy in.
My name's Catherine Lansbury. My background, I moved here 4.5 years ago, lived down in Williams. I've done environmental consulting and private consulting most of my life, dealing mostly with Clean Water Act compliance. In the past 8 months, I found myself working more and more as a consultant again here in the area, doing a lot of wetland delineations for landowners for commercial residential development. Also, I have found myself in the middle of doing compliance and getting med growers on board with the new program, and also helping some rec growers out with compliance issues, and I've been building that business. However, I see things kind of getting out of control, and the sustainability of things probably not being at best, and the long-term future of Josephine County, whether it be environmental, social, or economic impacts, need to be managed in a way that we can make sure we propel ourselves into the future and not destroy our county. That's kind of where I'm at with that. My background, I have a master's in environmental science. I've been doing compliance work on different state, federal, and local levels for about 18 years now. So I think that I can work in a very objective manner, having worked for private, federal, state agencies, and for nonprofit agencies. I'm here for sustainability. I think we can achieve that.
My name is Jeff Thomas. In spite of the fact it says Jeffrey, unless you want to be formal, it's Jeff. I have 25 years in the Los Angeles Sheriff's Office. I've got another 16 years with the U.S. Department of Justice doing counterterrorism work with our military overseas. In spite of what either of those may indicate, I don't have a leaning one way or the other except to protect Josephine County. I've got 5 sons. I've got 3 grandchildren to date. I'm sure I'll get more. And I want to have a Josephine County for them to live in. So what I'm interested in is equity. I'm interested in making sure that everybody is pulling in the same direction, the same weight, economically supporting our community and supporting our neighborhoods.
Good evening. I'm Don Fashing. Moved into Josephine County in 2004 and was a resident of the Illinois Valley for 12 years, and last year moved into Grants Pass. My background is 35 years in law enforcement. Majority of that was spent in San Diego. and then moved up here, and I worked with the county as the undersheriff for 5.5 years, and that position ended in 2012. I'm very concerned about the county and how it's going to move forward, and I'm looking at this committee as a means to find an equitable way to let this industry survive in this county, but also in a good way that will help and benefit the county. So that's my goal, and I'm looking forward to some open and objective discussion about this. Thanks.
Peter Gendron, as the name tag says, known a little bit better maybe at the OLCC and the state legislative level as Pioneer Pete. I've been involved in this process for several years, served on several different committees for the state, acted as a legislative advisor for the last 3 years, and by appointment of the governor on another committee. My family and I have been in Josephine County for over 2 decades now. We spent some time down in the Illinois Valley, some time around the Grants Pass area before we settled in the North County, Sunny Valley, on our property almost 20 years ago. I'm an Oregon medical marijuana program grower. My private business is Omnibudsman Enterprises. I do cannabis business development. I help people that are new to the system navigate the waters to be compliant, serving on the OLCC's Licensing, Compliance, and Enforcement Committee. That committee name was not an accident. That was actually an order of operations, and it still is to this day. This is going to be a set of obstacles that we have to overcome for the next year or so here while the OLCC gets their feet under them. The state rules are still changing, and I'm still involved in that process as well. My background includes quite a few years in management experience. I'm also an ASE Master Tech and Journeyman or Better Qualified in all levels of building trades. I've been in this county involved in one fashion or another, although more behind the scenes up until a few years ago, when it became very clear that for the benefit of the county and the state and the people that I live around, I need to be more actively involved in this process to make sure, as you've heard from some of our other committee members again, that we arrive at equitable solutions. This may be a marijuana committee, but this touches on all areas of life: finance, land use, management, individual liberties, personal responsibilities, are all things that we're going to have to take into consideration as we're making our decisions over the next few weeks.
Thank you. Steve Becker. I'm a physician and have been for the last 25 years. I've been running the business and have dealt a fair amount with the medical legal side of things, so I'm not a stranger to how legal processes work. Running a business has its own complications, and being a physician means that my primary job is listening to people and seeing what I can do to make them better, steer them in the right direction, and help them make really good choices. So I moved here about 6 years ago. I've also had personal experience. My significant other had breast cancer, and I got to experience how the mainline medical practices sometimes don't pay much attention to what's going on and occasionally have to look to alternate medications. And I've seen that they can work for certain individuals. So I'm very interested in helping out. Obviously, we need to reach a consensus. Misinformation is really probably the biggest problem that we're going to have. At the last 2 meetings that the Planning Commission had, there was a lot of misinformation. I had a chance to speak with Peter. He's a very well-informed individual, and I think that we're going to work together with the population to make things work in the future. We need to reach a consensus. The growth of the industry is not going to go away, but then again, we need to look at what the problems are and how we can come up with solutions that we can recommend to the Planning Committee and the Board of Commissioners. I have a BA in biology, my medical degree, and I've served on a number of committees and helped run a number of small businesses. Thank you.
Don't tell my staff person that I just undid all his tape that he worked so hard to do, getting everything in there, but I don't like being blocked in back here. We intentionally tried to have a group that is diversified, representative of various areas that we will be facing on this committee, and representing all aspects of the industry. And I think we have a very broad representation of that as well. We have another committee member. I'm not even going to try to say his name because I know I'll get it wrong. Renee Pear, I think. Pere. See, I was going to mess it up. And he's not going to be able to be at the meeting this evening. And the good news is our next meeting we feel is an important enough topic that we're going to be video recording it so that it can be available for future reference and availability with that. So with the committee members, a couple things I need to let you guys know. Sorry, I undid that so I can get out here so you don't have to look behind you. So one important aspect our legal counsel advised of is you do represent a public body because you've been officially appointed by the board. So you fall under ethics rules for public meetings as the county commissioners would, or a city council, or the planning commission. So if there is an item that you come up for that you have a vote on that you personally could benefit from because you have a business connection or someone in your family does, you do have to declare if it is an actual conflict of interest or a potential conflict of interest. I have asked our legal counsel to clarify how does that work when we asked a bunch of advisors that are experts in a field to be on an advisory committee on that field. Everything's a conflict. I mean, as far as representing your industries, but we can have the discussions, but if it comes time to weighing in on a vote, or as the topic comes up, okay, so if we do on the next meeting talk about rural residential, anybody who has a grow would be either a potential or an actual conflict of interest of a rural residential grower, or an EFU may benefit from rural residential ban. So either way, if anybody has a grow, you'd have to declare the conflict. You then can continue to go on with the meeting. You just have to keep in compliance with ethics laws, make the declaration of the conflict of interest. This is a weird topic to be in. We want your expertise because of your involvement in the industry. At the same time, we don't want you to get in trouble with Oregon ethics laws. So the gist of it is, if the topic matter is pertaining to something that your personal business or someone in your immediate family would personally financially benefit from that vote in your favor or against somebody that's a competitor, you would declare the conflict of interest. We will, by the next meeting, make sure that you have those details specifically so you know how those conflicts would weigh in. We still want you to participate. We still want your expertise and your feedback and all of this. We want to protect you from getting in trouble with the State Ethics Board. So, and honestly, I found out about that at 4 o'clock, and it's like, are you kidding me? You know? Okay, so what was that?
You're going to go on site and fill out the required forms?
Yes, but before we took a vote, I wanted to make sure that I let you know about conflict of interest and declaring conflict of interest before you took any vote, because we were on the topic matter of chair and vice chair. And quite honestly, this is new to me. How do you not, I mean, I'm on the board of health where you have experts in health all there to advise on health matters, and they take votes and recommendations and they're all health related. So how is this any different? I don't see that it is, but I just know that I don't want you getting in trouble for anything and with the State Ethics Board, and I was told to advise you of it. The other thing I want to make sure is any communication has to be in a public meeting. It can't communicate with a quorum of this group outside of a public meeting. So you can't all email each other, or Steve email Peter, who emails Don, or emails Jeff, and then down the line as a daisy chain. Communication has to be here, and we'll talk about ways to, if information needs to be shared with the group, how to do that to still honor public meeting laws. And we'll go through all of that tonight. But I want to make sure that as we are forming this group, that we're intentional, that everything we do is above board, so that we have a successful outcome and get the fullest out of the opportunities we have to learn from each of you and have these discussions. And so truly, we're honored that you're willing to help us out in this process, so thank you. So you've heard from each of the people that are involved with their bios and all this kind of stuff, so now we have an opportunity to nominate a chair. After we select a chair, we'll take nominations for a vice chair, and then we'll go from there. You guys could be really cruel, and since Renee's not here, throw him under the bus just to see what, no, I'm just kidding. So, would anybody like to nominate anybody for chair? Can you do it into the mic? I'm sorry, just for the sake of the record, since my minute taker's not here.
I'd like to submit the name of Undersheriff Flashing, please.
Okay, so Don Fashing has been recommended.
I think that he's uniquely qualified, and I've seen him in action running some really unruly crowds.
I don't think it's fair to call the commissioners unruly, but I appreciate that you think he can handle us. Okay, so Don has been recommended. Is there any other nominations? Okay, all those in favor of Don as chair? It's unanimous. So Don, I'm going to pass the mic to you to take nominations for vice chair, and then we'll go from there.
Well, thank you all for your confidence, and hopefully I will chair this meeting in a satisfactory manner for all of us and move forward positively in directions we need to go. So at this time I would open for nominations for vice chair. And please use the mic. Thank you.
I would like to nominate Valerie as vice chair.
Any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Peter. I would like to nominate Peter.
Peter, all right. Any other? As far as protocol, do we need a second or just move forward on a vote?
We haven't adopted Robert's Rules of Orders. I appreciate the feedback from the audience. This is a working committee, and if we're being civil, we can do it as we go. If we need unruliness, then we can add Robert's Rule if we have to, but we're not dictated by it. I would say go for one and then the next. Take a vote on both and count up who's got the higher numbers.
There we go. All right, Valerie then. All of the committee members in favor of Valerie as vice chair, please raise your hands. All those in favor of Peter as vice chair, please raise your hands.
Including Valerie.
That covers it. Peter Gendron will be vice chair of this committee. Thank you.
I guess I should have clarified and asked if either of you accept the nomination.
Okay.
Do you want to keep going or you want me to?
Why don't you keep going since we have to go through? Okay, so I'm going to keep going since we're doing business. The chair has asked that I keep going with the bylaws. So the next item up for grabs is bylaws. In front of you, there is essentially a 3-page template, and I'm going to run through this. So question comes up as far as what is the scope for this group. If anybody in the public, first off, just to let you know, this group is going to make recommendations to the board for bylaws. The board can take it, leave it, adopt it, toss it. They'll take it under consideration, the recommendations for the board. And until the board adopts bylaws, they're not officially in effect. So the recommendations, I didn't make a bunch of copies because the potential of it changing, and then once it's adopted, the board will have an adopted official one that would be available. So if we are out of them. However, if you would like the draft to be emailed to you, we can make a second list up there. If your name's on the email list for the rural residential, I can email you the draft as well if you want the bylaws. I'm going to go through them. You'll hear them. And again, they're not official until the board adopts them. And after the time the board adopts them, they'll be available that anybody can request them through the board's office. So
I'm already going to suggest that we start with paragraph 1 as the name of the organization, and I want to challenge it. I don't like Cannabis Advisory Committee. I would rather it be a Cannabis Advisory Board, because I like the acronym CAB better than I like the acronym CAC. That's just me personally. I know that's silly, but the other side of that is there's already something in our community called a Citizens Advisory Council, which already has the initial CAC. And I do not want these being confused with each other. So my first recommendation is that in all the references that we would change committee to board. However, before that actually can be made official, I need to check with legal if there's a definition of committee versus definition of board that I'm not aware of. But just from a standpoint of being not confused with a Citizens Advisory Council, my concern is with a Cannabis Advisory Committee, a CAC may be confused with the Williams CAC, which is an acronym used in planning matters frequently. So just off the top, I just thought I'd throw that out there that if it were my preference, I think that it should be the Cannabis Advisory Board versus committee. So, all right, so going forward, the name of the organization shall be the Josephine County Cannabis Advisory Committee, or JCCAC. It shall be an advisory committee to the Josephine County Board of Commissioners, BCC, on matters pertaining to cannabis, marijuana, and hemp. The purpose of the JCCAC is to advise and make recommendations to the Josephine County Board of Commissioners regarding matters concerning the growing, harvesting, processing, and marketing of cannabis, and to report to the Board of Commissioners regarding issues that affect the cannabis industry, except as may be otherwise provided for herein. The JCCAC shall comply with Josephine County administrative policies and procedures and policy A-4 of the advisory bodies, boards, commissions, committees, and subcommittees, which is on the county website under human resources, and that is in the administrative policies. Article 2 is committee role and responsibility. JCCAC role and responsibility will perform the following. A is review and make recommendations on matters pertaining to cannabis, marijuana, and hemp. B, advise and make recommendations for the purpose of creating positive local, state, and federal policy regulations regarding matters concerning the growing, harvesting, processing, and marketing of cannabis and industrial hemp. C is report to the BCC regarding issues that affect the cannabis and hemp industries, the positive and negative issues, and how it impacts surrounding residents and their property. D, assess and make recommendations on the cultural impacts of the industries in Josephine County. And I want to pause there and see if anybody has any comments or questions related to that portion. There's a funny look, Gerard. Cultural. How is cannabis changing the culture of Josephine County for the better or worse? How is culture impacted?
It is our culture.
It could be defined as our culture, but just remember you have to speak into the mic. Peter.
The first thing that I underlined was cultural impacts, and I'll go back to the statement that I made earlier that an industry, as part of the economy, has a cultural influence. This isn't about picking colors for the county flag. It's about assessing how the decisions that we're going to make here are going to address the culture of the communities that we serve. In the estimation of our opinion on behalf of the county, and hopefully with a lot of feedback from the public who we're going to be affecting. It has been noted at previous Board of County Commissioners meetings that the turnout at these meetings tends to be overwhelmingly in favor of the cannabis industry, but the turnout at the ballot box is pretty evenly split, and I, at least as a committee member, am relying on input from the public in order to weigh my decisions appropriately. This is everybody's culture. We make the culture working together or not.
I'm glad that you said it. On the record.
So one other aspect, what you don't necessarily see is land use law in here pertaining to cannabis, marijuana, and hemp, because we already have a planning commission. That's their job. What you don't see on here is prevention and treatment, which is required through state law for us to have a component of, and especially with Measure 91 and the taxes we're collecting, there's a component of. One of our staff members that is assigned to this committee is Sean Martinez, who is our treatment and prevention manager for Josephine County. She is not able to be here tonight, nor is Julie Schmelzer, who is our community development director, who has handled a lot of the planning issues related to the topic. But both of them will be bringing items to the committee for discussion and such, for those items to be discussed. But because there's already committees that are advisory to or have a legislative impact on these topics in the county, there's a reason why they weren't left in the bylaws here. Because if they're already being met in a different fashion, that's not necessarily the sole focus here, though that needs to be a part of the discussion. You know, for instance, complaint from some of the schools that kids are dropping out of school to go work on grows. Yet OLCC regulations and no one under 21 can work on a grow. So how do we as an industry say, you know what, we want to help keep our kids in school? What can we as an industry be doing to help promote keeping kids in school and keeping in compliance with the regulations in a way that honors the intent of it, so that we're doing that? And maybe recommendations of how there could be educational pieces of going into the schools and speaking of, hey, this is why we need you to stay in school. Get really good at engineering so you can craft a better way for me to grow my stuff, or do this and that. Or maybe we bring the agricultural products back to Illinois Valley since the greenhouse got taken down, and Hidden Valley is the only one left. So maybe we're talking about a better way of cultivating any agricultural product in the schools, and then you have a benefit to the industry. But if you're not at the table talking about that, how do we get there? So anyhow, those are some examples of items that might be brought forward to saying, here's an issue that we're facing culturally. How do you weigh in on that? Okay, any other comments there? It's going to get more boring from here out, I promise you. So exciting. Go team. All right, so the advisory committee, section 2 is shall be advisory in nature only and shall have no responsibility or authority over any public employee of the county. Additional tasks, the JCCAC will review projects and reports as requested by the BCC. Membership. The committee shall consist of 9 members plus 1 alternate who shall be appointed by the BCC and serve at the pleasure of the BCC. Qualifications are that it must be at least 18 years of age and must reside within the boundaries of Josephine County. Committee membership representation shall be as follows: 9 members at large, 1 alternate member, and consideration may be given for to include but not limited to a medical, recreational, industrial hemp grower, producer, a cannabis processor, agricultural farm supplier, a planning, land use representative, a prevention specialist, water systems expert, citizen advisory committee representative, and representatives from geographical regions of the county. I think we did a pretty good, what we found is getting 9 people, we ran out really quick, trying to make sure everything's represented. It's like, okay, how do we make sure this, don't forget them, wait about this. So we're hoping that we try to get as many of these considered in the selection that we have here. The Josephine County Board of Commissioners shall assign 1 person who is employed by the county as an ex officio non-voting member. That is me, sorry. And appointment of members. All members of the committee shall be appointed or removed at the pleasure of the board. When a vacancy occurs, the BCC shall appoint a replacement member and may refer applications to the committee for recommendation. Appointments to fill vacant positions shall be for the remainder of the term of said vacant position. All members shall serve 2-year terms and are eligible for reappointment by the BCC. Appointments may be limited to 2 consecutive terms. There's been different questions between the board. Is this an ongoing committee? Is this a short-term committee that kind of like a task force that serves a purpose and goes? My intent that it's an ongoing committee, that this is a part of Josephine County and it needs to be an ongoing thing, that we're looking at the opportunities that come through here. But we'll see, as every committee, we review whether or not they're still serving a purpose towards the board, if it's still needed or not. And most of our other committees have a 4-year term, some have 3 years. We started with 2. We might burn you out, we'll see. But it took off the restriction of 2-term limits, which every one of our other ones have a 2-term limit, so we removed that portion. as far as opportunity to let other people be a part of things and get there, so we're looking at every 2 years. Normally, we would have offsetting membership, but we have y'all in here for the first 2 years and kind of see where things go from there. How is it going? How is this working? With it being a new committee, we'll evaluate as we're going and go from there. Let's see. Okay, so officers, Section 5. Officers will be a chair and a vice chair. Officers shall be elected by the members of the committee and first meeting and shall take office immediately. Chair, vice chair will serve a term of 1 calendar year or until a successor is elected. Chair shall preside at all meetings, shall perform those functions usually associated with the office, shall be able to make, second, and vote on all motions. Vice chair shall preside in absence of the chair and will assume chair's responsibility. If neither the chair or vice chair is available for publicly convened meeting, then the assembled quorum of the meeting will select a temporary chair to conduct the meeting. Resignations, termination, and absences. Resignation from the committee must be by written communication to the Board of County Commissioners. Upon recommendation of the board liaison, a committee member may be terminated from the JCCAC by the BCC. A committee member shall be recommended for termination due to excess absences if that member has failed to attend 3 consecutive meetings or 4 meetings during a period of 1 year or less, if any of such absences are unexcused. Special meeting of the committee may be called by the Board of County Commissioners or the board liaison in coordination with the committee chair. Notices of special meetings shall be sent out for each committee member at least 1 week prior to the meeting. Any questions so far or comments? We shall continue.
Just one on section 4. You said you are striking the language on appointments may be limited to 2 consecutive terms.
Yes, so it did say before appointments shall be limited, and we switch it to may. So it gives the option to not. Because Peter, you're going to be doing so awesome, we're just going to keep you on this indefinitely. Just kidding. Yes, sir. Commissioner DeYoung brings up calendar year as the option, so that would mean we turn around and change in January. I would recommend 480. Well, let's see. It's unusual when it's the first one. Generally, it would be January of the first year the committee would recommend a new chair, and you can elect a chair and go from there. And being that it wouldn't be that the chair hadn't served quite a year, you guys can choose to renominate him or nominate somebody else in January. Any recommendations on? Yes, sir. Or we could do it a year from now because this is the start of our committee and it'll be a year's time from now. And so the turnover will be calendar year in September of each year.
I believe the fact of the matter is that we really just don't know each other all that well to be putting people as chair and vice chair. I think this is a really good start, and I think we should revisit it possibly at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
I think it's the most logical thing to do.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
Alrighty, so we'll see how she goes and we'll look at it in calendar year, looking at January as the opportunities. Just realize that your terms are expiring in August, I think, per the order when they were created. Okay, we're on to subcommittees. The committee may create subcommittees as needed for purposes such as, but not limited to, culture impacts and industry growth or pending legislation. The chair of each committee shall be appointed by the board liaison. Meeting schedule. They shall meet at least 3 times per year. I hope you meet more often than that, by the way. Okay, so the committee shall meet at least 3 times per year at a time and place designated by the Board of County Commissioners or staff person. Quorum is a majority of the appointed voting members of the committee, and that will at this time be, since there's 9 voting members, that would constitute 5. Decision making. The committee will make decisions by consensus of the majority of the voting members present at the time of the vote. The alternate is a non-voting member, except when there is an absence by a voting member, in which case the alternate becomes a voting member for that meeting only. Members must be physically present at the meeting to be entitled to vote. Conduct of meeting. The committee chair shall convene regularly scheduled meetings and shall control the conduct of the meetings. The board liaison shall represent the committee at meetings and communications with the Board of County Commissioners. Minutes and records pursuant to county administrative policies. The Josephine County Commissioners shall assign a staff support person to keep minutes of meetings, record all of the committee actions, and send out meeting notices and announcements, distribute copies of minutes and agenda to each committee member, and maintain records in accordance with Oregon Public Records Law and state archives requirements. Open meetings. All meetings of the committee shall be open to the public. Notice of meeting shall be given by the assigned staff support person in accordance with Oregon Public Meeting Law. Conflicts of interest. So this is a part that is important because you guys are subject to conflict of interest. Declaration. The committee is subject to ORS 244.020, 244.040 subsection 1, and 244.210 to 244.030, defining conflict of interest and establishing protocols for members of public bodies in Oregon. Committee members are expected to declare a conflict of interest prior to consideration of any matter causing a potential or actual conflict. What I can do is, if you go to a Google line, you can put ORS and those numbers just like that. It will bring it up. But I will also email out the group all of the links to those so that you have them, so that you're familiar with the difference between actual or potential. And realize with conflict of interest, it includes yourself and any member of your immediate family. So if it's not you, but it's your spouse or your child or someone in your immediate household or family, that counts as your conflict as well. And you would just simply say, I have an actual conflict of interest because I am a blah. And you say what it is, and then you go on from there. So it does not mean you can't take part, but you do have to make the declaration to be legal. A potential conflict is defined and exists when a committee member takes an action that reasonably could be expected to have a financial impact on that member, a relative, or a business with which the member or member's relative is associated. The committee member may participate in an action after declaring the potential conflict and announcing its nature. The actual conflict is defined. It exists when an action is reasonably certain to result in a special benefit or detriment to the committee member, a relative, or a business with which the member or member's relative is associated. The member will declare the actual conflict and announce its nature. The member must then refrain from taking any action except when the member's vote is necessary to make a decision under Article 5, Section 3. So, if it is such that everybody's actual conflict would mean that there's not enough people to vote with a quorum, you would still take part in the vote. Otherwise, you can take part with a potential conflict of interest, but in an actual conflict of interest, this is saying you would not take part in the vote unless there's not enough people to vote. Being that there's most likely not going to be enough people to vote on some matter, potentially, we would make sure that we have those declared, determine how many it takes to vote, and go from there and make that decision as each item comes up. Hopefully, each situation won't affect all of you in the same way, and so that we'll be able to still conduct business. Are there any questions about the conflict of interest? Yes, sir, in the mic, please.
On Section 3, when you get into action is reasonably certain, that's fairly vague. I would probably request a legal opinion as to, or get more definitive as reasonably certain means. I think it's putting a lot of burden on the committee members who may be reasonably involved in it. So
I can tell you that state law is as reasonably vague.
Okay.
And the State Ethics Board sides on the you better know what affects you or not. But we will get that defined and make sure we get that opinion back out to you guys. But if you have an inkling of an idea that you or your family member may be affected, declare it. If it's better to side on the side of declaring the conflict than having gone through the meeting and not declared the conflict. So at the very least, it's always better if you think, and I've had conflicts where I've had family members when I was a city councilor that are involved in something that they're a distant enough family member that there's not an actual conflict because it requires, it's like up to your first cousin, your parent, your this and that. I mean, but I have so much family in town that it was like a second or third cousin, it's not a conflict. I still declared it. I just didn't want there to be a suspicion of impropriety. So it's kind of one of those things that take the side of caution because you're covered by making the declaration. You're not covered if you, oh, I didn't think there was, so I left it off. err on the side of caution. Gerard, you had a point, but you need a microphone. We're not as fancy as city council that has those pretty ones attached to each seat.
I'll pass it on to him. Are you going to have a separate page for ex parte and the responsibilities of the person who has ex parte information? I notice it's not a section you have here, is it?
So ex parte contact was defined in the form that you all signed when you came in?
There's a responsibility if you have ex parte.
So here's the thing. I don't anticipate that you will be having any hearings. Ex parte contact is pertaining to a hearing.
You had committees you were going to be breaking up, so if you had a committee report, for instance, and a person had an ex parte in there, they would have to declare that.
Potentially.
So potential ex parte, they got information that the other committee members don't have.
But it's not having a hearing. But I will make sure that we verify with legal if
We
that.
have a responsibility, the planning commission, we have to show.
Planning commission is a quasi-judicial function.
Correct, but even
This board is not.
The only time it doesn't apply is legislatively.
And you guys will never be dealing with a legislative issue that you actually have a legislative say on. You may give us advice regarding a legislative issue, but you're purely advising in that legislative issue. And I hope that you're getting feedback in the public. What you can't be doing is getting feedback from each other and bringing it back to the committee. But you absolutely can go back into your networks and say, hey, this is coming up. Give me some feedback. What do you guys think? How does this affect you? How does this affect there? So where it's different from a planning commission, when it's advisory only, you will not be making decisions on a legislative nature. Mike, I know you still have more to say. Okay. But I will make sure legal counsel weighs in on that and verifies. And if it's required in a subcommittee to say this is the source of my contact, I've had this contact that is weighing in on this, I will find that out. But as far as my experience goes, the only time ex parte comes into play is when it's a quasi-judicial function of a legislative nature or land use decision. And since this will not be applicable to this group.
Except for the committees.
The committees even will not, because you guys are purely defined as advisory to the board. So the subcommittees may research a topic and bring it back to this committee.
So they will put that in this, that there won't be, and if there is, they're going to say that we will not have that obligation under ex parte, correct? Wally will put that in here?
Okay, so let me point to, every committee member was asked to sign a form that was under public meeting law and a two-sided thing. And the ex parte contact, as defined by our legal counsel, this was a memo from our legal counsel that asked that every person taking part in an advisory board sign this form. Ex parte contact means receiving evidence or information outside of the context of a public hearing. Members of advisory boards that conduct official hearings, such as Rural Planning Commission and the Budget Committee, should avoid ex parte contact to the extent practicable, and must report such contacts on the record immediately after the subject hearing commences. Similarly, it is good practice for all advisory board members who have been lobbied or have unique information about a matter that is under official consideration by the body to describe their ex parte contact prior to engaging in discussion or voting. Having a direct or indirect financial interest in the matter that is under consideration should always be disclosed prior to participating in any discussion about the topic. So it is recommended that if we're having a discussion that you have been lobbied on, that you would advise. I've been lobbied on this by, I'm going to put you on the spot, Peter, because you have an association with everybody in the state. I have been lobbied by the Republican senators of Southwest Oregon to have this position on this topic. And you would declare that ex parte contact. Since you've declared it, you may now go on with providing the information they've asked you to lobby. The difference, though, being is that it's a recommendation of this board to have that. It is a requirement of the boards that have a public hearing. There may be a time that this committee wants to seek public information on a topic. My recommendation would be that you guys specifically hold it. This topic we'd like to hear something about. Let's see what the cultural impact Cannabis is on our area high schools. Let's get some feedback. And you open up a public meeting and this is our topic and we're going to get public input on that. That is a potential that you guys can schedule and do. Or you can say we're looking for the specific impact of hemp in this industry in relation to how is that affecting medical and recreational growers. Maybe that's a topic that you want to have and discuss and get some feedback from people who have had cross mixes of different, kind of vegetation and such like that. So the potential is there for doing that you can as a group say, we all think we would benefit from having the same access to the same public feedback. Or the other thing you can do, like what we're doing at the next meeting, is inviting a specialist in the area to come and speak. I debated on whether Peter should be a part of the committee or whether we should use him as an expert coming to the committees and teaching us on the topics because of your experience in the legislative area. And weighing back and forth, it's kind of like, how can I not have you on this committee? So it's kind of one of those things, but we may say, okay, maybe we want Representative Wilson to come right the same night as Rob Bovett, and they both speak from their perspective from the legislative things. You can also lend your experience through that, or we say we have it on another evening or something like that. The possibilities of what we schedule are great, and that's part of what the chair is going to be doing, is directing the agenda and moving forward in various aspects that happen. Any other questions on ex parte contact?
Thank you.
Okay, did anybody not sign this form that I asked that everybody submit? Whoop, and I didn't mean to throw at you, Steve, sorry.
Just one question. You mentioned exchanging information. If we exchange information, because let's say Peter has a tremendous amount of information he thinks would be very useful for all of the members of the advisory board to review, as long as he sends that to everyone, does that fulfill their obligations that we have?
No. So matter of fact, so one way you can do that, and is a safe way of doing that, is say, Peter, you would email me, and then on the blind copy line of the email, you would put the rest of the committee and just said, FYI, here's the information I'm providing. But if any one of us hit reply all, it's only going to Peter. And it's one of those things that it's not everybody able to respond to everybody, because that's the whole idea, is you don't want to take the chance that one person hits reply all and you've all now received that comment and now you've had discussion on a topic that wasn't a public meeting. It's better to not even respond to the email. So you can send an email out saying, you all need this information, don't comment. And the way that you guarantee you don't get everybody responding to everybody back is you just send it on the blind copy email. And that way it doesn't, you will notice the first email I sent you all, you didn't have everybody's email addresses because I had put you all on the blind copy line because you didn't have the rules yet of what not to do. And well, actually, no, I didn't, because the reply went out to all of you guys and you did reply to everybody. Oh, well, now you're under the rules. Don't do it again. But the idea is just the same as, Steve, you're not going to email them all and then each of them give your response back. You've all weighed in on the topic. That's violating the rules. You cannot comment back on your information. You can't, as an FYI, consider this as well as a rebuttal to what he said, that you're discussing it. Save it for the next meeting. Or if you know that you have enough, the safer thing is to send it to me and I'll distribute it to the group and we'll go from there. Or, but the idea is that you do fall under public meeting laws. Don't email everybody back. If you have a change of address on your email address, send it back to me and we'll make sure the group gets that. But essentially, you can share information, but be very careful because you don't want anybody replying and you don't want anyone weighing back in and that you have kind of like a daisy chain meeting. Make sense? Clear as mud? Okay. Or our smoky air? Yeah, okay.
When in doubt, don't.
When in doubt, don't. Yeah. Okay. Continuing with our riveting topic. Amendments to the bylaws. The committee may propose amendments to the bylaws. Any recommendation agreed upon by the majority of the advisory board shall be forwarded to the BCC for consideration. The board of county commissioners shall have sole authority to adopt, amend, repeal bylaws by BCC resolution. All committees of the county, this next part pertains to, the committee shall provide the Board of County Commissioners with an annual report detailing committee's accomplishments over the past year and proposed work plan for the coming year. The annual report and work plan are due to the Board of County Commissioners office by February of each year. Effective date, these bylaws shall become effective upon the approval of Josephine County Board of Commissioners by board order. And as you can see, the dates below are all left blank as far as it's not been approved or adopted yet. Any other comments on this?
Only that February 28th of each year seems to assume an active committee date that begins January 1st and ends December 31st. You wouldn't necessarily want to be waiting for us from August 31st until February 28th for an annual report. So we might take that into consideration when we revisit the issue of duration of appointments in January.
I think you're right, and part of the issue of the February and the key to that is it's going into before we establish our budget for the year and before we're going into budgeting year. And so as a topic may come up that a committee has a need for, the county's addressing budgetary issues, we want to make sure that the reports on the success and the accomplishments of the committee are to them before they go into budget session. So that's the significance of the February 28th date. So I wouldn't necessarily think to change that date, but it is something for us to consider that getting on that January cycle is appropriate for the committee for the sake of kind of dealing with where things are at. So. Any other thoughts? Chair, would you entertain a recommendation on or a vote on recommendation of the bylaws?
Before I do that, I would just like to make sure that the minutes reflect that we are going to, again, review the chair and vice chair positions January 1 and for a vote.
And that we're considering, do you guys have a preference on Cannabis Advisory Committee versus Cannabis Advisory Board?
Good point. Committee or board? Can I see some hands on both on board? Board. All right, then let it so reflect.
Okay. The board recommends a board.
Board recommends a board.
For the board. Okay. You guys are going to find I have a horrible sense of humor and it's pathetic, but it gets me through meetings, so I'm sorry.
We may need that.
All right.
All right, any other recommendations from the board? So then can I have a vote? All those in favor of the bylaws as revised? I see a hand, please. Unanimous.
And unanimous. Thank you. So we've talked about some of what the board thought of scope and role, but I'm going to invite Commissioner DeYoung up for his, we had an hour and a half scheduled for you, is that correct? Just kidding. Commissioner Hare had a previous engagement that he has been trying to get out of and he could not. He was trying all day and was not able to do that. So he sent his apologies that he could not make it tonight. But Commissioner DeYoung asked if he could go to his other meeting tonight and said, no, you have to be here. This is the most important meeting in Josephine County tonight. And so he is here. Without further ado, no. So essentially, opportunity for the commissioners to speak on scope and role that we see as the advisory committee and our interaction in various things. So I'm going to give you a chance.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you personally for stepping up on this board. Excuse me, I'm going to have a little trouble with that one. We as a Board of County Commissioners, you know, this was all new to Josephine County. You know, the fact that Measure 91 passed and there's a tremendous amount of mail and phone calls that we get every day on both sides of this fence. So Commissioner Morgan and her, while she was running for county commissioner, this is one of the things that she ran on, the formation of this committee, of this board, and she's following through on that. What I'm looking for out of the board is direction. I'm looking for you to basically, and we do this at Rogue Valley Area Commission on Transportation. It is people from Talent, Phoenix, Ashland, Central Point, Eagle Point, Butte Falls. There's all kinds of jurisdictions in the room, but we leave our jurisdiction at the door, and we discuss and pass policy and discuss policy with our jurisdiction at the door for the greater of all actually Region 3, I think it is, for Rogue Valley Area Commission on Transportation. That's worked out really well, and I think it's just kind of on our honor system. I've campaigned at RVAC for a project in Talon, and it meant giving up a project in Josephine County or in Merlin to go to Talon. And I've also part of our transportation bus system. We put that on hold in Josephine County so that Chetco over there, Brookings, could have a walking path and an intersection across Highway 101. 101. So we left our jurisdiction at the door, and I'm hoping that you all can do the same thing. You're an advisory committee, and we're going to look to you for an awful lot of guidance on this. There's some real, Mr. Fitzgerald, I'm glad because you've been, you're a realtor, you're going to see a whole different side than maybe some of the other board members. So I'm just glad. It looks like a good cross-section here. I think Commissioner Morgan was talking 3 times a year, and I think you're going to want to probably meet more than 3 times a year, I think, to be effective. So, but I appreciate all of you, coming up, stepping up. This is going to be contentious from the word go, but I think we said a long time ago, and I think, Peter, everybody that I've talked to said this is not a process that's going to snap overnight. It's something we got to have an awful lot of talk and a lot of consideration before we do anything. So I appreciate all of you there. I'm looking forward to your input. That's the shortest hour and a half you're ever going to have.
The timing of where we're at with the rural residential stuff coming before the Board of County Commissioners, with the hearings coming up on the 20th, and the following one I think is scheduled October 6th. It's not the timing that I would hope for with the formation of this group. And the reality is that what the point of those committees happening at the timing that they are is that it's trying to meet the deadline before next year's grow season, as so the decision is made that people don't make decisions and then the rules change mid-season. And so a process that takes 6 to 9 months to complete unfortunately gets going, even though this process wasn't where I wanted it to be early enough in the process. But I do want to give an opportunity for feedback. I had a discussion with the legislators' staff today about the proposed amendments, and I can tell you that it's going to be something that we're still accepting public feedback on. There's been question about us having public feedback in this committee, but the reality is that we chose you guys because of the expertise that you bring to this, and each of you offer a different part of the puzzle, the piece of the puzzle that you each represent, and you have connections to the community that have access to you to give feedback in some other areas. And what my expectation is, I'm going to throw somebody under the bus I've never met, so I apologize. Jake, I heard you are a water master of Oregon.
The regional assistant water master filling in for Kathy Smith after her retirement.
Okay, assistant regional water master. To me, he is somebody that would be a great person to come and speak to this committee. And the committee can bring up the water concerns that come up, that every neighbor has. One of the aspects of the rural residential that is already out, by the way, is the water truck restrictions. When that came back after the Planning Commission to the board, Commissioner DeYoung and I said, no, we don't want any water truck restrictions, and it's out. So the recommendations you saw in the printed form don't have the water truck restrictions any longer. But that doesn't mean that there's not water issues related to as much additional farming and gardening that are going on in Josephine County that brings people's concerns to light. There's also been some people that have paid no respect to creek beds that are spawning creek beds or other impacts of waterways. We have other people that are not being respectful of waste and DEQ issues and causing contaminants in various areas. Those are concerns that maybe we have some opportunities to get enlightened by bringing an assistant water master of our region in to talk to us about our options. And then a recommendation could be made of the board of, well, can you guys do this? Because water isn't our jurisdiction of all things. It's the state's, either through DEQ or the water master, everything else. But we're the ones fielding a lot of complaints. And so if people are looking to us for some advice, maybe we can get them routed to the right places or some right answers or just recommendations. If somebody's got a concern of someone running a pump and bypassing a shutoff, what is the appropriate thing to do? How is the right way to respond to that? I had somebody ask me, they're pro-grow, and they had their neighbor beat up by a grower. And now, granted, it wasn't the property owner, it wasn't the grow license, but it was one of his employees that messed up and went over the property line and took out some trees and beat the guy up. And he went to say, hey man, you run over my trees, can you watch it please? And that was the result. My thinking is, how has the industry let that happen? You know, if you see someone mistreating somebody that's not doing right by the system, call them out on it. Call the owner and say, that's not how we are. We're professionals, and professionals treat people with respect. Something like that. So, for me, I should let you know that I am the black sheep of my family. I am one of the few people in my family not in the industry. I can't keep up with the income of any of my relatives because they're in the industry and I'm not. No, they got successful businesses. I have a lot of family that in Lane County are in the industry, and so it's important for you guys to know that I have family in the industry, so I'm declaring my connection of sorts. And I have family members that have used medicine for their cancer treatment and such like that, and so from seeing people going through their struggle with their battle with cancer and seeing the impact, that's my exposure. My other side is I was a parole officer for 11 years, and I dealt with people with alcohol and drug treatment. And whether they were using serious drugs, whether they were using anything else, from my standpoint, I want people to be in a point that they're not coping mechanism is one subject. I want to know that they have a variety of coping mechanisms that are working in their lives. And if somebody wasn't able to cope without a substance, whether it be cannabis or something else, my question is why? What's going on that they're so dependent on that? Why are you using sleeping pills to go to sleep every night? Is there something else that needs to be going on? Whatever the subject is. What if you're drinking too much and you have to drink 6 beers to go to sleep every night? That's something, as a parole officer, I wanted to get to the underlying area of what is that going. So I have seen people that have been in a place of abusing something that also can be used as medicine. Same as other pills can be used for good and other. It's not a blanket thing, but that was my professional background in dealing with people in addiction situations. My hope out of this is that we see a way that we can view the economic development aspects and the growth and the potential of business by also maintaining that we're not getting kids out of school early or that kids aren't using, because it is illegal for kids to use. And I would like to see them have an opportunity to choose the full scope of what's ahead of them versus dropping out before they get to school. So if we can find a way to reach our kids and encourage the best outcome in their lives, that they choose whatever they do once they become adults, that's on them. But as long as they're kids, we have an obligation to keep them out of stuff that could maybe prohibit them from developing to their fullest potential. So as far as my, I typed up the roles and responsibilities. So that's kind of where I'm coming from as well. Commissioner Hare's biggest concern was the culture and the impact of culture. That was what his request to be relayed to you was, as far as his aspect. But otherwise, my hope is that, again, this is a working committee, that we have honest conversations about where things are at. Anybody that says there's not issues related to this that have come up, I can tell you one, I do not believe that marijuana is the problem. 100% it is not the problem. People making choices of greed and selfishness and not being good neighbors has created most of the issues that have created the complaints that have been concerned with. And why is it getting marijuana the label? Because it's the growth of the industry that's affecting it right now. If somebody was growing tomatoes at such a level that had taken over the whole county, we would be getting tomato complaints left and right. I mean, it is the industry that's behind the growth, is all I'm saying. It's not the industry's fault, it's people's fault. The same as, well, yeah. So we do have to acknowledge that there are some people that have made some decisions that aren't in the best interest of the whole industry and don't represent the whole industry. So by saying there's no problems, that doesn't really get there. But at the same time, let's address those problems. Let's figure out some solutions, and let's see how we can move forward and have a successful outcome where the economy is thriving. One thing that we would like to look at is how can this industry help the whole community and not just a small area. Colorado, I just went to the National Cannabis Conference, for instance. It was a neutral party. It wasn't for or against topic. It was just looking at here's where we're at, what's the policies and regulations, what's worked in Washington, what's worked in Colorado, what hasn't worked. As states are looking at legislation, what are some good ideas for them? One of the things I learned about Colorado is they do the taxation as it leaves the grow site. They also do a taxation at the retail location. They do a taxation at almost every state because the county's tax, the city's tax, and you can be double taxed and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is it goes back to the system where it's affected. With us at Oregon having a system that is only taxed at the permitting, essentially, because the businesses that are getting into this legally are paying a whole bunch out of pocket to get into the industry. But otherwise, the taxation is at the retail end. And because it's distributed based on the retail end and not on the growing end and the impact, the $60 million they collected the first year of taxes statewide, Josephine County's portion that we're supposed to get in September, oh wait, it's September, still haven't got it, is $150,000. $150,000 doesn't really go back to help our community with the issues that is going on. So the potential of how do we actually see if this is the economic hope of our future, how does it truly help the whole economy of the community? Maybe that's something we can solve. Maybe we can figure out what that possibility is. And so, anyhow, we've talked long enough on the board's thoughts on the roles and scope of the community. Just a little bit about the next item is our future meeting times, locations, and frequency. I would hope that we meet at least monthly and go from there. A special meeting can always be called if there's a topic related to something coming up. I know the Oregon State Legislature, they have a short session in January or whenever it is for 5 weeks-ish, whichever months those are. They may have some topics, and it might be important to be meeting more regularly when that time is. And before the 19 year, when they're meeting for 6 months, there'll be topics coming up. So establishing a frequency, but realizing that a more frequent meeting time may be called based on a topic is appropriate. Right now, just based on my schedule, the next meeting was scheduled first. So September 26th was the first meeting that I scheduled because that was when Rob was available to come down from Salem. And instead of doing it by Skype or something else, he wants to come in person and be available. So there's two things he has. He has the knowledge of all the legislative changes and the current status with state law and kind of where things are coming and all that. But he also, like I said, has the regulations of the rural residential recommendations that I emailed him. So he'll be equipped to answer questions related to that. So I want you guys to, this is the current recommendations that are coming before the board on a hearing on the 20th. We'll meet on the 26th, so after Rob speaks, give you guys a chance to kind of open up the questions, and we'll give you a chance to discuss between you guys any recommendations you would have for us as a board before bringing it back to the hearing on October 6th. Yes, sir, Gerard?
Since Jake's here, can we try and see what he's got open?
Since who's here?
Jake, how quickly you forget his name.
I thought you said Jay, and so I'm racking my brain of who Jay is. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the Jake.
Your next meeting's
after, I'm not going to have you speak that night because Rob's going to take most of the night. And I imagine our discussion on rural residential will take the rest of the night. So what I will do is meet with you afterwards, and I will find out when it's appropriate. Are any of you in conflict on a Tuesday night schedule?
I was just going to ask that of the board members. Generally, when I have been or participated with a committee or a board, usually monthly meetings. I don't know if that's satisfactory. If we want to meet more than once a month, and if we do meet once a month or maybe twice a month, I'm retired, so it doesn't matter to me, but a lot of you are real busy folks. Usually you pick a day, say for instance the second Tuesday at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night, and that way we all know we can just block that out on our calendars, that we know that the second Tuesday of each month or the second and fourth Tuesday of each month we meet with this board. Can I get some feedback from the committee? What do you think? Once a month, twice a month?
At least once a month.
I would say at least once.
I like starting out once a month on Tuesday.
Tuesday. All right.
Not Wednesdays. I mean, that's urban area.
Right.
If I may suggest, I think we have a lot on our plate that's coming up really quickly, and we should schedule at least 2 meetings before this main vote.
I wonder if daytimes work for anybody. This is my family dinner time, which I'm willing to miss monthly, but this is a request from my family. And another comment, the morning of September 27th, I have a Rules Advisory Committee meeting for the OLCC up in Portland. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be at the...
Generally speaking, an evening meeting tends to work better for most with accommodating work. But I mean, it's you guys' call. Staff will try to work around, but there's also times during the day that it's not always as available as I can force them to work after hours.
All right, I'm looking at a calendar, and we have the Tuesdays. The second Tuesday of October would be the 10th. Will that work for everyone? No, I'm seeing Valerie's going.
Well, just realize not everybody's going to always be there.
Yeah.
If you find a pattern that works, so right now, tonight's the second Tuesday of the month, the 26th is the fourth Tuesday of the month. We didn't want to wait for the first meeting that you guys have to be 5 weeks out from your appointment, so that's why we're meeting tonight, go over the business aspects, and then on the 26th, really have that discussion with Rob and give you guys as a committee time to talk about the stuff before a hearing on the 6th. So if you guys want it to be monthly based on tonight or monthly based on the next one, I would recommend you choose one or the other and kind of go from there.
Comments from the board regarding the second Tuesday? We're good with that? All right, so time, am I hearing a dinner issue? 7 p.m., would that be better, or no? 6?
It doesn't matter for me if it's in the evening. I
All
was
right.
just curious if daytimes would work for people, but I understand that's generally a conflict.
Well, I do meetings during the day.
How are day meetings with anybody?
I can make it.
I'm available. I don't think I'd be.
Why not alternate?
Many.
For many, okay.
Why not try to accommodate some days and some nights, some days and nights? If that way you'll have people that miss at night, they'll be there during the day.
One comment I'd like to make about the evening meetings are those people who want to participate. We may have people who work and are not going to be able to get off work, and they certainly should have a voice here as well.
I was going to say the same thing.
Good point.
I'm willing to give up my request.
Okay. So is 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. good for everyone? All right, then why don't we let the minutes read that we will hold our next meeting after the 26th, October 10th at 6 p.m. at the location, Commissioner?
Oh, we may be changing it. I had reserved the Marine Hill Conference Room because of the ability to have sound. It's already built into the room. So mic and presentation's easier to do there, and it holds 180 people versus some of the other locations, but I don't necessarily have the ability to record and process it. So we're thinking about doing Ann Basker for the next meeting because we can record and broadcast. And so potentially that's what we're looking at, is the 26th will be at the Ann Basker. I was scheduled for the Marine Hill, but we're looking at moving it so we can broadcast and make it available to more people, and it'll be recorded so it can be accessed after the fact. It does hold less people at 130, but again, the ability to broadcast seemed to be of greater importance for the topic matter than that. So, and then after that point, we'll probably pick a location that will have normal meetings scheduled at that point. And I have to figure out room availability in county buildings and such, just so.
Okay. All right. Any other issues, Commissioner?
Gerard has his
Could you
hand
get a
up.
Gerard,
roster?
go ahead.
Could you get a roster out to the members of the of the board with the other names, phone numbers, and emails, so we have them?
I will. And we'll also get the clarification on ex parte just to make sure legal's weighed in on that. We're going to make sure that you get the documentation of the ORS on the issues about pertaining to conflict of interest, so you have that information.
Are we going to sign up online in the ethics like we always have to?
Who does that? No, I'm just kidding.
Every year.
I'm kidding. I do an ethics training every year, so I know I'm just kidding. We'll make sure we bring that next time as well.
It's online. You just go online and do it.
Okay.
Yeah, you just go online and sign up. Fill it out and it's done. They changed that just last year.
Good to know. All right, so we'll be following up with that. For those of you in the audience, I'll make sure to leave the sign-up list if you want your name or email on the list for the ability to get emailed the rural residential proposed text amendments. And we'll also send out the riveting, exciting, you're so glad you listened to the bylaws, unless you want to wait until we get them actually adopted, and then we can send out the adopted ones if your email's on that list if you want them. But otherwise, make sure your email's on that list if you want the information that we had passed out in the sessions tonight. So right now we know that the next agenda is going to be Rob. For the most of the agenda, it's going to be Rob. Questions as far as for him regarding the proposed text amendments are going to be from the committee. There have been lots of opportunities for public to give testimony on this. This is not that time. We're looking for you guys as a committee to give us feedback, and we'll go from there on receiving that feedback. Based on the scope of the feedback, we either go on with the hearing or we look at legal obligations of if it changes the scope of what the board is looking at, we start from scratch and go from there. And so we'll see. We'll see where it's at. There's nothing that is set in stone, and we have an advisory board for a reason, and we do want to hear from you guys. So for the gist of it, we may be adjusting the agenda a little bit, and just to make sure that we have everything fit in. I will follow up with Jake and get on his calendar for you guys and work with the chair for doing that. And really appreciate that everybody took the time to be here tonight. It is scary, especially when your livelihood is on the line. And I appreciate that you guys have taken the time to be here. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to work with the committee and have the opportunity to help us have a positive outcome and a positive looking forward for what cannabis is in Josephine County. So is there any other questions that you all have for the commissioners? All right, so Chair.
Hearing no other comments or need for comment, we'll close this meeting.
At 7:33 p.m.
At 7:33 p.m. Thank you all for coming.
Go ahead and leave your
Thank you.